I walked into that marble palace with $114 in crumpled bills and a gold key my dead mother left me. The banker, Gideon Graves, the kind of man whose cologne probably costs more than my rent, took one look at me and laughed. "Charity cases use the side entrance, kid." I didn't move. I slid the key across his desk. "Open the Rosewood Ledger. My mother said you'd understand." For 22 years, I thought my mom was just the help. Maggie, the cleaning lady, who scrubbed the floors of Graves and Associates, while men in $1,000 suits stepped over her like she was invisible. She came home every night with bleach burns on her hands and the same advice: never let a man in a suit convince you he's worth more than you. But when Gideon opened that ledger, his face went white. The account didn't say Maggie the cleaning lady. It said Margaret Rosewood Graves, the heiress who vanished 20 years ago with 60% of the firm's shares. And there, buried in the transaction history, was a name that made Gideon's hands start shaking. His own wife's name. That's when I realized my mother didn't just clean this bank. She owned it. And whatever she'd been hiding all these years, it was about to destroy the man who treated her like she was nothing. My name is Sam, and this is the story of how I found out my mother was never the person I thought she was. I still remember the sound of her keys in the door at 9:47 p.m. every single night, like clockwork. I'd be sitting at our kitchen table, the one with the wobbly leg we never bothered to fix, pretending to study while I waited. The apartment was maybe 600 square feet on a good day, with walls so thin you could hear Mr. Chen's television through the plaster and smell Mrs. Rodriguez's cooking through the vents. But it was ours. Maggie would come through that door with her shoulders squared, even when I could see the exhaustion carved into every line of her face. She'd set down her canvas bag, the one with Graves and Associates stitched on the side in gold thread, like they owned even her belongings, and she'd smile at me. Not the tired smile people give when they're barely holding on. A real one. "How was your day, baby?" she'd ask, already moving to the sink to scrub her hands. That's when I'd see them. The red, raw patches where the industrial bleach had eaten through her skin, the cracks in her knuckles that never quite healed, because she'd be back on her knees the next morning, scrubbing the same pristine marble floors of that fortress they called a bank. I asked her once why she didn't wear better gloves. She just looked at me with those patient eyes and said, "The thick ones don't let you feel if you've gotten every spot, Sam, and men like Gideon Graves notice every spot." Gideon Graves. I'd seen him exactly 3 times in my life, and each time I wanted to put my fist through his perfect teeth. The last time was 2 years ago, when I'd stopped by the bank to bring Maggie her lunch she'd forgotten. I watched him walk straight across the floor she'd just finished mopping, past the yellow warning sign, past her on her hands and knees, and snap his fingers at her without breaking stride in his phone conversation.
"Trash bin, 3rd floor conference room. Now." She stood up, knees cracking, and nodded. "Yes, Mr. Graves." He didn't even look at her. To him, she was furniture that occasionally moved. That night, she made us mac and cheese from a box and told me the same thing she always did. "Never let a man in a suit convince you he's worth more than you, Sam. Polish don't make the man." 3 weeks ago, she closed her eyes for the last time in that same apartment, in that same wobbly-tabled kitchen, and I realized she'd spent her entire life making sure I understood my worth. Now, I was going to make sure Gideon Graves understood his. Before we continue, if stories like this deserve to be heard, take 1 second to subscribe. Most people watch, few support. Don't be the one who scrolls past someone's story. The funeral was small. 12 people in a chapel that could hold 100. All of us clustered in the front 2 rows like we were afraid to take up too much space. I shook hands with Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd brought tamales. Mr. Chen handed me an envelope with $40 in it and told me Maggie had been a good woman. 3 of her co-workers from the bank came, still in their cleaning uniforms, because they had to get back to their shifts. Nobody from management showed up, not even a card. I came back to the apartment that night, and it felt wrong. Too quiet, too still. Her canvas bag was still hanging by the door. Her coffee mug was still in the sink. For a moment, I could almost convince myself she was just working late. Then, I saw the box. It was sitting on my pillow, small and wooden, the kind you'd find at an antique store.
Graves and Associates didn't look like a bank. It looked like a temple built to worship money itself. All white marble and chrome, with columns that stretched 3 stories high and chandeliers that probably cost more than I'd make in a lifetime. The kind of place where even the air felt expensive, filtered and climate-controlled to exactly 72 degrees. I stood outside for a full minute, watching men in $1,000 suits glide through the revolving doors like they owned the sidewalk. Maybe they did. My reflection stared back at me from the tinted glass. Worn jacket, scuffed sneakers, the kind of tired that comes from too many double shifts and not enough sleep. I looked exactly like what I was, someone who didn't belong. I remembered the last time I'd been here, maybe 10 years old, waiting on a bench in the lobby while Maggie finished her shift. I'd watched those same men walk past her, their shoes leaving prints on the floor she'd just polished. One of them had dropped a coffee cup and kept walking. She'd cleaned it up without a word. The security guard at the door eyed me as I approached. I kept my head up and walked through. The lobby was worse than I remembered. Everything echoed, footsteps, voices, the click of heels on marble. A massive desk dominated the center of the room, and behind it sat a woman whose makeup looked airbrushed on. Her nameplate read, Victoria Chen, Executive Receptionist. The way she looked at me, you'd think I'd tracked mud across her freshly waxed floor. "Can I help you?" The question sounded more like, "Can I escort you out?" "I need to see Gideon Graves." She didn't even blink. "Mr. Graves doesn't take walk-ins. If you'd like to make an appointment, it's about the Rosewood account." That got her attention. Her perfectly manicured fingers paused over her keyboard. "I'm sorry, what account?" "Rosewood. Tell him Margaret's son is here." Something flickered across her face. Confusion, maybe. Recognition, but she recovered quickly. "Mr. Graves is in meetings all day. I can take your contact information and someone will—" "I'll wait." "Sir, that's not—" I said, "I'll wait." We stared at each other. I could feel my resolve cracking, could feel the voice in my head telling me to leave, to go home, to stop embarrassing myself in this marble palace where I'd never belong. Then, I remembered Maggie on her knees, scrubbing. Maggie with her burned hands. Maggie who'd spent 20 years invisible in this building. I sat down in one of their leather chairs and pulled out the gold key. "Tell him I'm not leaving." I waited 2 hours before Victoria finally picked up her phone and whispered something I couldn't hear. 5 minutes later, a security guard approached, thick neck, dead eyes, the kind of guy who got paid to make problems disappear quietly. Mr. Graves will see you now. Follow me." We took an elevator lined with mirrors to the top floor. Every reflection showed the same thing, a kid who was in over his head. The doors opened to reveal an office that was bigger than my entire apartment, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, mahogany desk that looked like it weighed more than a car.
And behind it, Gideon Graves. He didn't stand up, didn't offer his hand, just looked at me the way you'd look at a stain on your shirt. "You have 5 minutes to explain why you're wasting my time." I walked forward and placed my crumpled bills on his desk, ones and fives, smoothed out as best I could. $114 that suddenly looked like Monopoly money on all that polished wood. "I'm here to pay my mother's final bill." Gideon glanced at the money and actually laughed. Not a polite chuckle, a genuine, condescending laugh that made my jaw clench. "Your mother?" He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Let me guess, Maggie, the cleaning lady? She made some errors in her work, damaged some property, and now you think this?" He gestured at my money like it was trash. "This pathetic pile of singles will somehow settle her debt?" "That's not—"
"Son, the interest alone on what she owed would eat this for breakfast. Why don't you take your lunch money and buy yourself some self-respect? Maybe invest in a decent jacket while you're at it." My hands were shaking. I wanted to grab him by his perfectly knotted tie, and instead, I pulled out the gold key and slid it across the desk. "Open the Rosewood Ledger." The smile died on his face. "What did you say?" "The Rosewood Ledger. Margaret said you'd understand." For the first time, Gideon looked at me, really looked at me. His eyes narrowed, moving from the key to my face and back again. "Where did you get that?" "My mother left it for me, along with instructions." "Your mother was a cleaning woman who—" "Open the ledger, Mr. Graves." Something dangerous flashed across his face. His hand moved toward the phone, probably to call security. I had maybe 10 seconds before I'd be thrown out of this building and never allowed back. "Unless you're afraid of what's in it." His hand stopped. Our eyes locked. And in that moment, I knew I'd hit something. He pulled his keyboard closer with jerky, angry movements. "Fine, let's see what fairy tale your mother filled your head with." Gideon's fingers moved across the keyboard with the practiced arrogance of a man who'd never been wrong in his life. He inserted the gold key into a slot on his desk I hadn't even noticed, some kind of physical security measure, and twisted it with more force than necessary. "Rosewood. There hasn't been a Rosewood account active in this bank for 20 years. This is a waste of—" The screen flickered. Lines of code scrolled past, some kind of encrypted access protocol loading. Gideon's expression was still smug, still certain he was about to prove me wrong and have me dragged out by security. Then the ledger opened. I couldn't see the screen from where I stood, but I could see his face, and that told me everything. The color drained from his skin like someone had pulled a plug. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. His eyes went wide, darting across the monitor like he was reading something that couldn't possibly be real. One hand gripped the edge of his desk, knuckles going white. That's not possible. What does it say?" He didn't answer, just kept staring at the screen, his breath coming faster now. I walked around the desk before he could stop me. There, in crisp digital text, was a name I'd never heard before. Margaret Rosewood Graves. Primary shareholder, 60% voting rights. Account status, active.
Last access, classified. Below it, a photograph. The same woman from the picture in my mother's box, but this one was professional, corporate. A woman in a business suit standing in front of this very building, looking like she owned it. Because apparently, she did. 60%? My mother owned 60% of this bank? Gideon's hand shot out, slamming the monitor off, but it was too late. We both knew what I'd seen. He turned to look at me, and for the first time since I walked into this office, there was something other than contempt in his eyes. Fear. Fear. Who are you? Though his voice suggested he was starting to figure it out. I'm Sam, Maggie's son. I picked up the gold key from his desk, feeling its weight differently now. But I guess the real question is, who was she? And why did you spend 20 years telling everyone Margaret Rosewood Graves was dead? Gideon's jaw worked, but no sound came out. The man who'd laughed at my crumpled bills 5 minutes ago now looked like he might be sick. The power in the room had shifted, and we both knew it. Gideon's hand was still hovering over the monitor when I reached past him and turned it back on. He didn't stop me. Couldn't, maybe. The man who'd commanded this office like a throne room 30 minutes ago now looked like he'd aged a decade. I scrolled through the account details, not entirely sure what I was looking for, but knowing I'd recognize it when I saw it.
Transaction histories, board meeting minutes, legal documents with dates going back 23 years. And then, buried in a file marked Estate Transfer 2003, I found it. A name that made everything click into place. Victoria Ashford Rosewood. Authorized secondary. Estate executor. Relationship to primary? Cousin. Victoria? Your wife, Victoria? Gideon's silence was answer enough. I kept reading, the pieces assembling themselves like a puzzle I hadn't known I was solving. Victoria Ashford Rosewood had been named executor of Margaret's estate in 2003, the same year my mother disappeared from this world and became Maggie, the cleaning lady. The same year, according to these documents, that Victoria had married Gideon Graves in what the society pages probably called the wedding of the season. You married her for the shares. Margaret vanished, and you married her cousin to get control of the Rosewood fortune. That's what this whole thing was about. You don't understand. Then explain it to me. My voice came out harder than I'd intended, but I was done being dismissed. Explain how my mother spent 20 years scrubbing the floors of a bank she owned while you and your wife played dress-up with her money. Gideon's face twisted, anger and panic fighting for control. Margaret walked away. She chose to leave. The business, the money, all of it. She just disappeared one day and left everyone scrambling. Victoria and I simply stabilized the situation. Stabilized. The word tasted bitter. Is that what you call stealing someone's life? We didn't steal anything. Margaret abandoned her responsibilities. She had obligations to the bank, to the family, to the Rosewood name, and she just left. What were we supposed to do? Let the whole empire collapse? So you told everyone she was dead? He didn't deny it. Just stood there, this man in his perfect suit in his perfect office, and I could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. He was trying to figure out how to spin this, how to regain control. Then his gaze shifted to something over my shoulder, and his expression changed completely. "Hello, darling. I heard we had an unexpected visitor." I turned to see Victoria Graves standing there, elegant and poised, her diamond necklace catching the light. She was smiling, but her eyes were ice. Victoria closed the door behind her with a soft click that sounded like a cell door locking. She moved into the room with the kind of grace that came from decades of cotillions and country clubs, her heels silent on the plush carpet. When she reached the desk, she glanced at the monitor, then at me, and her smile never wavered. "So, Margaret's son, I wondered when you'd finally show up." "You knew about me?" "Of course I knew. Margaret and I grew up together, best friends since we were 6 years old." She said it casually, like she was discussing the weather. "I was there the night she decided to throw it all away." Gideon shifted uncomfortably. "Victoria, perhaps we should—" "Should what, darling? Continue lying?" She turned back to me, and something in her expression softened, just slightly. "Your mother made her choice, Sam, and it was a brave one, even if I never understood it." "What choice? What are you talking about?" Victoria reached past me and pulled up another file on the monitor, a scanned document, yellowed with age. A marriage contract dated 2002 with Margaret Rosewood's name at the top and a signature line at the bottom. Unsigned. The Graves and Rosewood families had an arrangement. Margaret was supposed to marry Gideon, merge the fortunes, create a dynasty. It was all planned since we were teenagers, very old-fashioned, very proper, very suffocating. I looked at Gideon. His face was stone. "But then she got pregnant, with you, and the father—" She paused, watching me carefully. "The father wasn't interested in playing house with a Rosewood heiress who'd suddenly developed a conscience." The room tilted. "Gideon? Good God, no!" Victoria actually laughed. Gideon was far too calculated to make that kind of mistake. It was someone else, someone who worked at the bank, if I remember correctly, someone completely unsuitable. She pulled up another document, a memo from 2003, stamped confidential. I scanned it quickly, words like reputation management and family disgrace and termination recommended, jumping out at me. They wanted her to get rid of you. The family, the board, even me. We all told her it was the smart choice. Keep the fortune, marry Gideon as planned, move on with her life. But she didn't. No, she showed up to the wedding venue the day before the ceremony, this beautiful, historic mansion, 300 guests invited, and she told everyone the wedding was off, told Gideon she wouldn't marry him, told the family she was keeping the baby, told me. Victoria's voice caught just for a second. She told me she'd rather scrub floors for the rest of her life than raise a child in a world that measured people by their bank accounts. The silence that followed Victoria's words felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. I could feel the weight of the gold key in my pocket, the weight of 60% of a financial empire that had been built on my mother's back while she scrubbed its floors. Gideon found his voice first. "Sam." He stepped forward, hands raised like he was approaching a wild animal. "Let's be reasonable about this. You're clearly upset, and you have every right to be, but—" "Reasonable?" The word came out like broken glass. "What I mean is, we can come to an arrangement, a generous one." He was sweating now, desperation bleeding through his polished exterior. $10 million, cash, transferred today. You sign over the shares, walk away, and you never have to think about any of this again. You could honor your mother's memory, set yourself up for life.
You think this is about money? Everything's about money, son. Your mother learned that the hard way. She chose pride over prosperity, and look where it got her. Dead at 52, with nothing to show for it but burned hands in a studio apartment. I moved before I could think, crossing the space between us. Gideon stumbled backward, and for a beautiful moment, I saw real fear in his eyes. My mother had more dignity in her burned hands than you'll ever have in your entire life. Sam, please. Victoria's voice cut through the rage. Think about what you're doing. You have the power now. You could destroy us, expose the lie, tank the bank's reputation, ruin everything Gideon and I have built. But then what? You become the vengeful heir, the bitter son who burned down his mother's legacy just to watch it bleed? She was right, and I hated her for it. Or, Gideon added quickly, sensing an opening, you could take your rightful place. Join the board. We'll make you executive vice president. You'll have an office on this floor, a salary that... So I can become you? I looked at both of them, these people who'd worn my mother's inheritance like stolen clothes. So I can learn to look through people the way you looked through her? We're offering you a kingdom. Don't be stupid enough to throw it away for sentiment. I thought about my mother at that kitchen table, her ruined hands wrapped around cheap coffee. I thought about her choosing poverty over this poisoned palace. I thought about what she'd told me my entire life. Polish don't make the man. I pulled out my phone. What are you doing? Gideon's voice pitched higher. Calling my lawyer. You don't have a lawyer. I smiled for the first time since entering this office. I do now, because I'm gonna need one to help me restructure this entire bank.
3 months later, I stood in the same marble lobby where I'd waited as a kid, watching my mother scrub floors while men in suits stepped over her. The lobby looked the same columns, same chandeliers, same pristine white marble, but everything else had changed. The nameplate on the wall now read Graves and Rosewood Associates. My lawyer, a fierce woman named Patricia who worked on contingency because she believed in what we were doing, had made sure of that. We'd restructured the entire operation. Fair wages for every employee, from the cleaning staff to the executives. Profit sharing, healthcare that actually covered people. An ethics committee with real power, not just corporate window dressing. Gideon was gone. Not destroyed, not ruined. I'd let him keep enough to maintain his lifestyle, though it killed me to do it. But he was out of power, his voting shares reduced to a whisper. Victoria had stayed on the board, surprisingly. She'd voted in favor of every reform I'd proposed. Margaret would have approved, she'd said after one particularly contentious meeting. I didn't know if that was true, but I wanted to believe it. The foundation had launched last week, the Margaret Maggie Rosewood Foundation for Working Families. Scholarships, small business loans, emergency assistance for people one paycheck away from eviction. We'd funded it with dividends from the bank's ethical investments, and it was already changing lives. I picked up the brass plaque in my hands, the one I'd commissioned to be mounted right here in the lobby. It was simple, no bigger than a book, but it mattered more than anything else I'd done. In memory of Margaret Rosewood, 1972 to 2024, who taught us that dignity isn't measured in dollars, and that the hardest work is often the most invisible. She cleaned these floors with grace. We honor her by standing on them with integrity. Maria, one of the cleaning staff who'd worked alongside my mother for 15 years, approached me. She was carrying the plaque's mounting hardware. "This is beautiful, Mr. Rosewood." "It's Sam, just Sam." I handed her the plaque. "And thank you for helping me install it. Your mother would be proud, you know, what you've done here." I looked around the lobby, at the workers who now made living wages, at the customers who'd stayed because we'd proven you could do business ethically and still turn a profit, at the marble floors that someone was scrubbing with proper gloves and fair compensation. I hope so. I really hope so. We mounted the plaque at eye level, right where everyone would see it when they walked through those doors, right where Gideon used to stride past my mother without a glance. I stepped back and looked at it, my reflection visible in the polished brass. The final bill is paid, I thought, not in crumpled dollars or revenge,
in something better, in dignity, in change, in making sure that no one else would ever be invisible in this building again. My phone buzzed. Patricia, texting about tomorrow's board meeting. There was still so much work to do, systems to reform, policies to implement, a culture to shift. But for now, I just stood there in my mother's marble palace, no longer a fortress keeping people out, but a foundation lifting people up. I touched the plaque one more time. We did it, Mom. We really did it.